are live inside America's Newsroom.
And I'm Molly Lyon. Great to be in with you. I'm in for Sandra Smith. Judge Kavanaugh is expected to face some pretty tough questions from some Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, who argue Chairman Chuck Grassley is keeping them in the dark on Kavanaugh's past, refusing to hand over records from his work as a lawyer in the George W. Bush administration. Republicans say that's not true.
Senator Grassley's been very fair. More documents given than any person ever nominated to the Supreme Court. We're going to have a hearing. There's no drama in this hearing. The only drama is those running for president. How will they handle this hearing on the Democratic side? We're going to get this good man confirmed.
This is the big story looking ahead at this week. Jillian Turner live from Washington with more. Jillian.
Good Labor Day morning, Molly. Still a point of contention in Washington today, now just 24 hours out from Kavanaugh's hearing. The roughly 100,000 pages of records the Trump administration announced it's decided to withhold.
The first time in history, this denial of access to documents violates a rule that we thought was the tradition of the Senate. They are suppressing these documents. If we're lucky, we will see 6% of all of the documents that have been produced or could be produced to reflect on Kavanaugh's true position on issues.
Senate Judiciary Committee Republicans point out more than 2.5 times as many records have already been produced for Kavanaugh than for any other nominee in history. It's nearly 500,000 pages so far.
The Democrats have more than enough information to understand that this is a highly qualified jurist that should be the next Supreme Court justice. In an earlier time, 30 years ago, he would have passed unanimously.
But Democrats insist it isn't the numbers that matter. They say the American people have a right to transparency and to Kavanaugh's complete record, no matter how voluminous it may be. Judge Kavanaugh spent much of the past week in prep sessions for his hearings, known here in Washington as murder boards, where close aides and advisors grilled him on the toughest topics that are likely to surface. They're fully anticipating a grueling hearing for Kavanaugh, especially with lawmakers in attendance who are eyeing presidential bids in 2020. They're likely to use their questioning as a vehicle to highlight their own stance on President Trump's policies. Molly?
Jillian Turner, thanks. A peek ahead at what we'll see, and stay with Fox News all this week as the Senate begins confirmation hearings for Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Our special coverage begins tomorrow.
We move on now to trade. President Trump tweeting over the weekend about that topic, warning Congress to stay out of the NAFTA talks. Here's one of his tweets saying that there's no political necessity to keep Canada in the new NAFTA deal. If we don't make a fair deal for the U.S. after decades of abuse, Canada will be out. Congress should not interfere with these negotiations, or I will simply terminate NAFTA entirely, and we will be better off. Remember, NAFTA, says the president, was one of the worst trade deals ever made. All right, Peter Doocy live now from the White House with more on this. Tell us how the president's trying to shape the debate today, Peter, over NAFTA.
Connell, he's taking aim at the union boss, Richard Trumka, by tweeting this just now. Richard Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, represented his union poorly on television this weekend. Some of the things he said were so against the working men and women of our country and the success of the U.S. itself that it is easy to see why unions are doing so poorly. A Dem. Now, part of Trumka's point this weekend on television was to be supportive of changes to NAFTA, but skeptical until he sees more details.
We haven't seen whole chapters of the thing. We're anxious to move forward with it and anxious to have all three countries involved, because NAFTA has had a devastating effect on the working people of this country for the last 25 years.
Trumka also emphasized that he wants any changes to NAFTA or a new NAFTA deal to benefit workers in all three countries, the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. Connell.
Well, you look at, the calendar, Peter. We're obviously talking about labor on Labor Day, which is one thing. But as we get after this point of the calendar from now until November, you think this becomes a bigger and bigger issue, right, ahead of the midterms?
It is a huge part right now of the president's pitch to purple state voters. In fact, he just said this in North Carolina the other day.
I know when we're getting ripped off, the whole world is ripping us off. And the stronger we get, the less likely it is that we have a problem, okay? That's the one thing I've learned. I learned that. You know when I learned that? In grammar school, I learned that. I learned that a long time ago. You learned that as a little boy playing baseball in the yard. The stronger you are, the less likely it is that you're going to have a problem.
The president does not have any public events on his schedule today, but that doesn't mean we won't hear from him. Connell?
That's true. Always true. Peter, thanks. Now this.
I supported Jeff Sessions when he was nominated. I certainly voted for him, and I think he's doing a good job.
Do you think there's any reason for the president to remove him?
The president has the constitutional authority to remove him.
Do you think there's any viral event?
As I mentioned, he can do it. Would it be politically wise? I don't think so.
Alaska Republican Dan Sullivan commenting this weekend on Attorney General Jeff Sessions' uncertain future. President Trump has blasted Sessions for recusing himself from the Russia investigation, as well as what the president calls Sessions' failure to take control of the Justice Department. Byron York is chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. Byron, thank you for joining us on this Labor Day. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Molly.
So, kicking things off, this is something that's been in the news a lot lately. What is Jeff Sessions' fate? From the very beginning, it seems just weeks into his tenure there as the Attorney General, the president seemed to be pushing back, and yet he has stayed and stayed and stayed. Now it seems like, perhaps after the midterms, that could be the end of the road. Your thoughts on Jeff Sessions' future?
Well, the president has basically made it clear that he's sick of Jeff Sessions for quite a while now, basically going back to March 2nd, 2017, which was the day that Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. But Sessions is still here, and the reason for that is the United States Senate. You just heard Senator Sullivan talking about it, and basically Sessions worked in the Senate, served in the Senate for 20 years. His old colleagues there, Republicans who control the Senate, have basically told the president until recently that they did not want him to replace Jeff Sessions. And basically the message was, if you fire the Attorney General, you'll have to get a new one. And the only way you can do that is through Senate confirmation, and we're not really in the mood to do it right now. And amazingly enough, the president has not fired Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, and certainly the Senate has a busy week ahead, so they probably wouldn't be getting it done at least in the short time here as they look towards the midterms. You talk about the Senate, the loyalty that Jeff Sessions had achieved over his many years there and the friendships that he has. Despite those friendships, it seems like to a certain extent there are some congressional leaders that are saying, you know, like for instance Senator Lindsey Graham, there seems to be a bit of a shift to say that the president should have someone that he has confidence in. Your thoughts on that shift that we're beginning to see in the lawmakers in Washington?
There has been a change in the attitude of some Republicans toward President Trump firing Jeff Sessions. You have to remember that other than the Russia matter, Jeff Sessions has made a lot of Republicans really happy pursuing a Trump agenda at the Justice Department on drugs, crime, immigration, and other issues. So they're actually happy with the job that he has done. But it was very important recently to hear Senator Lindsey Graham, who is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and has also become close to the president, goes out and plays golf with him, has heard many times the president complain about Jeff Sessions. Senator Graham, came out and said that this is a dysfunctional relationship between the president and the Attorney General. It is time that a change was made. And this is essentially a member of the Judiciary Committee giving a green light to the president to fire the Attorney General.
Now, there's been significant speculation about what the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, if he leaves, what that could potentially mean. What does it mean for the Mueller investigation? What is the president's intention? All of those sorts of questions, Democrats have been particularly hard on those types of issues and talking about what it could mean for the future. So if we look ahead, a little peek past the midterms, let's say that the Attorney General either resigns or is let go by the president. What does it mean? Does it have an effect on the Mueller investigation?
Well, we actually don't know. We've heard the president say many times in some of these rally speeches that he gives that he's been staying out of intervening in the whole Russia matter, but he kind of reserves the right to do so in the future. And one of the reasons Republicans don't want the president to fire the Attorney General is they believe that will be widely viewed as the first step toward firing the special counsel, Robert Mueller, in the Trump-Russia investigation. That would, of course, cause a huge firestorm. The Republicans certainly don't want that between now and November when they're up for re-election. But whether firing Sessions would actually be the first step in getting rid of the special counsel is not known, or whether the president is just so irritated at Jeff Sessions every single day that he wants to get rid of him.
I want to talk just about the Attorney General himself. This tremendous pressure, and yet he continues moving forward to the extent that he, and gets some praise from fellow Republicans, other lawmakers there in the Hill, that he is succeeding to a certain extent in enhancing the president's overall agenda. How does he keep going head down despite these ongoing attacks from the president?
I don't know. He must be, doing yoga or meditating or something. He really does seem to have insulated himself from a lot of the president's pressure, although he did make a public statement the other day saying that his decisions would not be affected by politics at all, which was a clear response to something the president was saying at the time. But Jeff Sessions came into the job of Attorney General with a clear agenda. He had been working in the Justice Department and in Congress and on the Senate Judiciary Committee for many, many years. He knew some things that he wanted to change inside the Justice Department, again, on issues like crime, like drugs, like immigration. And he has focused on those ever since his recusal from the Russia matter.
All right. Byron York, thank you so much. Something to look ahead to after the midterms. We shall see.